Pantone's color of the year for 2025 is Mocha Mousse. And this is my color of the year video. I'll be honest, when I saw the color of the year, Mocha Mousse, I thought, bleh. I was uninspired and I was very tempted to skip it this year. But I thought I really can't do that, so I attempted it. It was an unmitigated failure. It actually ended up in the garbage, and this is my second attempt. So I don't have a color called Mocha Mousse in my repertoire. So I Googled it and they said use a brown and a red and an orange and mix the color. So I am using raw umber and alizarin crimson and some white gesso, and I'm just mixing it up, looking on my phone, trying to get something similar as I can. It may not be exact, and that's okay. I'm good with that. Now, this brown I struggled with because most of my vintage browns have a yellow tone, and this one is definitely on the side of pink. It's a different color and was part of my struggle. I'm just testing it and I keep mixing it, and I'm getting a pull of it once I figure out my formula. Now, this beautiful magnolia napkin is called Magdalena. It comes from Ninny's Napkins. I'll put a link in the description box. It's still available. I absolutely love it. I'm thinking, okay, pink goes really good with this, with browns, with the pink in this brown. So I rough cut it and then I peel off the excess layers, and then I'm going to use my liner brush with a little bit of water to water cut off all the excess. I just work my way around and little by little, add a little water, run the brush there and pull off that part of the napkin. I'm removing any of the background. Now this napkin, it has a light shade of pink. It's not white, so it's not going to go completely translucent. So, and I like to tidy it up. So I typically remove as much of this as I can. I'm removing that, and then I can audition it on my 7x10 mixed media page. And look how beautiful this is. So I thought if I'm not so fancy or not so hot about the color that's going to be in the background, I am going to go with to die for focal image. Now I want to add some texture to the background because I think that's going to add some interest to what I am deeming an uninspiring color. So I'm putting this in 3 places. This stencil is called Screen View. A good basic stencil goes for any theme that you're going to do. I like the openings, the size of it, and I've gotten a huge amount of use out of it. So if you're looking for a good basic, this might be it. So I'm just going to put that in 3 places, and I've left my napkin focal there. It's not glued down just yet, but I want to avoid putting any texture right under the napkin because it's unnecessary. So this I set aside and I let it dry. And now I'm going to glue down my napkin focal. And I'm doing that now because there's a lot of white on that. And if I put the Mocha Mousse color in the background, that's going to come through. So I want to glue my napkin down, my focal down beforehand. And I'm using Liquitex Fluid Matte Medium, my preferred adhesive, and then I am putting a coat of it on top to seal it or to turn the napkin into a non-porous surface. And I'm doing that because I know I'm going to overpaint later and I don't want the raw napkin. I want it non-porous because it'll take the color medium better. So I'm just going underneath and gluing this down. I'm being very gentle here with my brush because the napkin, when wet, gets fragile, so you don't want to inadvertently rip it. Love magnolias. In fact, I grow a burgundy magnolia in my yard that blooms early spring every year, and the buds are already there. So again, once that's dry, I'm ready to move to the next step. So now I am going to apply my mocha mousse mix to the background. I'm using a makeup sponge. I use a brush. You can use your fingers. It doesn't matter what utensil you're using to apply the paint. Each is going to give you a slightly different effect. Go with what you want. I'm loving how the paint is catching differently where I put the modeling paste and it's stenciled, and that's giving some interest to my background because this color is fairly boring. My challenge is to build interest into the background, and adding that modeling paste with the texture there is adding to that. So I'm just going to add color all the way around my napkin focal. And I'm getting some areas are darker, some areas are lighter. And again, that's a way to build in interest. I'm adding gesso. I'm using some of the mocha mousse mix straight up, a little bit darker, but you want that variation. You don't want it to look flat and boring. The modeling paste that I used is from the Crafter's Workshop, as is that screen view stencil. There is a link in the description box too if you want to go check out the stencils and some of their mixed media supplies. I think there's even a coupon code down there. I'm just putting that in. I want it modeled. I want variation. And that is going to be my challenge with this color, is to build in interest. So I'm adding some darker areas, just filling it in, coming in with white, adding some darks, and playing with it. Now I'm grabbing some of that raw umber, which I used to mix my mocha mousse, and I'm putting it on the makeup sponge and rubbing it atop of the modeling paste. And it's catching in some higher areas. And again, adding some interest there. While the challenge is to use the color of the year, it doesn't have to be all over, right? I can use other colors and to bring out and work with that color. I do come in with some black on top, so there's some brown and as well as a little bit of black that I go over top of the modeling paste. This stencil from the Crafter's Workshop called Art Is, and I'm using a Crafter's Workshop stencil brush, and I am using a surprising color. I'm using Prussian blue. Now, the reason for this is there is some blue in that napkin. Now, I was tempted to use black, but I thought, you know what? I'm going to go with the blue, something a little different. And actually, I really like this once it gets going. Although I admit I do doubt my choices. But you know what? You got to play with it. You got to experiment. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. And I learned that sometimes doing the unexpected works for you. So I'm just putting a little bit on the stencil brush and working it in there. And that is a great way of getting the paint through some of these stencils that have very, very fine openings, like this script stencil. I just play with this, and without doubt, I put a little too much, but I solve the problem later. Doing mixed media, doing art journaling is a bit of a dance. You add, you subtract, you bring forward, you push back. And every layer adds to the final product. But you're constantly solving problems, which is why I love it so much. Just embrace the process. Now, at this point, that stenciling is a little bit too forward, a little bit too noticeable. for my liking. But as I said, I'm going to solve that problem down the road. I thought, okay, well, first I'm going to edge my page and I'm going to shade all the way around. I'm using my angle brush and black acrylic paint, and I'm just framing my page. This always helps me think and view my background and what I've got going on, and making those decisions about whether I'm done or whether I need to add something else. So while the shading or edging is a finishing step, I like doing it sooner than later because it helps me decide if I am really done. And I'm liking how that's framing the picture and bringing it into focus. Now I'm ready to overpaint, and I'm grabbing some straight up white gesso and brightening the whites of the magnolia focal. I'm just kind of really globbing it on, and it takes this napkin that has been decoupaged on, and it makes it look like I've hand painted it. So people question, did you really paint this? So I'm adding some gesso where the whites are and where some of the pink is, because again, it's going to, when I come back with more color later, the pink color, it's going to look more like it's been hand painted. When you start the overpainting process, it's a bit intimidating, but quite honestly, it is a great way to take somebody's art and, for those of us who do not draw or don't think we can draw. So here I'm just adding some white gesso on it, and I'm going to come back with color and go on top of that. But it's going to add that texture and make it look like it's hand painted. As I said, my first attempt of using the Mocha Mousse color was a failure. In fact, it's one of the very, very rare pieces of art or art journal pages that I end up throwing out. I was very frustrated at the time, and I tell you that because let's keep it real. It happens to all of us. Things don't always go according to plan. I was trying to force the creative process using the color of the year, and you know what? It didn't work. So I moved on. But I am very, very happy with how this page turned out. So, you know what? Don't give up. I think picking a focal image that I loved really helped. And here I'm just adding a little bit of the pink highlights on the white parts of the flower here. And there is no right or wrong. Nobody's going to have the napkin to compare it with to see if you are exactly right. As I said, this napkin is still available. It was available in two sizes, the 6.5 size napkin, as well as the cocktail napkin, the 5-inch napkin. But I know it is still available in the 6.5. So if you want to grab this beautiful one, check out NINNYSNAPKINS.com. Now I'm adding a little bit of that Prussian blue to shade the pinks and some of the flower parts of the flower. Now they already had some in the initial one on the original art on the napkin, and I just added a little bit more, and this ties in with the blue stenciling that I put in the background. Remember, you want everything to work together, so there's rhyme to my reason, or reason to my rhyme, as the case may be. And adding this blue in here really made it all work out really, really well. So, lesson learned. I tried something different and I made it work. Now, some of that blue stenciling here was a little too forward, So I am pushing it back with a wash of watered down gesso. And I'm just rubbing that in. It's just pushing back that blue ever so slightly and making the background a little bit more hazy, dreamy, allowing my focal image to be focal, be the front words. And this is what I mean by the dance. You put down the base coat and then you tweak it and you add to it or you subtract by pushing things back. And you can't be afraid to try. If you don't like something, a coat of watered down gesso might just be the trick. I'm liking that dreamy kind of look that I have, so I'm just playing with it. I'm adding some of that mocha mousse in as well. You can't really tell when I've put it on the brush, but this softened it. Then I thought I want to add some of that alizarin crimson that I overpainted on the magnolias into the background. So I grabbed this bubble stamp and I'm putting that red paint, alizarin crimson paint on it and stamping. And this, again, it makes it all work. So there's the blue and the red in the background, and there's that blue and that red on our focal image. And it's working together. It's at this point, it was like, yes, this is working. I am so happy with this. So you want to have some stamps like this that are fairly small scale, adding some of that color to your background, but not really competing with your focal image. Loving it. Now I have some sentiments, and this is from my Word of the Year sentiment pack, which is still kind of a work in progress. But my sentiment pack, my Word of the Year this year is actually a phrase called moments and memories. So I'm auditioning several of the quotes here, and I choose the one that says, moments become memories, memories become treasures. So this sentiment pack will be available, as are all my sentiment packs, as a digital download from NINNYSNAPKINS.com. So if you're looking for sentiments that you can use on any size of artwork, go and check that out. It's a digital download, and then you can change the size to fit any size, large or small. I grab my charcoal pencil and I'm doing some shading and adding some lines on top of my napkin. Some of those division lines kind of disappeared when I overpainted, and I'm just putting sketchy lines in. I'm not too careful. I'm holding the pencil very loosely. I don't care if it's a perfect line in the perfect place. I find the less I work so hard to do something, the better I like the end result. Add a little bit of shading in there, although I do come back later and add more. Then I'm using the charcoal pencil to darken up the shading around the edge. Somehow the charcoal gives that, it's a different look than the shading that I did with the brush. Here I'm just adding some darks in here, and then just going to shade with the charcoal pencil around my sentiment. This piece I love so much, I might take another one of the focal images from the napkin and put it on a canvas. I've been using the mocha mousse, so I'm thinking I am done here looking at it. I decide I'm going to add more shading or underneath, behind my focal image. I'm just adding some darks in here. So I'm using the charcoal pencil and smudging it out. And this is just making the focal image stand out a little bit more. So I'm sketching in there, putting some charcoal down and just shading so you've got some shadow happening in the background. Loving that background, all the components of it. There's lots of interest, lots going on in that background, but it works perfectly with the focal image that I chose. So I'm glad I didn't give up on Mocha Mousse. It challenged me and I rose to the occasion. Here are close-ups. I hope you give this a chance. Give it a try. There's the napkin before and after. All that wonderful texture and details in that background, the interest that I put in. Don't give up. Until next time, go get creative.